Hi, this is the SAR Native Plant Nursery team. I'm Julia, pronouns are she, her, and I am one of the co-leads.
Hello, my name is David, pronouns are he, him, and I am the other co-lead.
Hi, my name is Mia, and I use she, her pronouns.
Hi, and my name is Audrey, and my pronouns are she, hers.
And I also want to say thanks to Melissa for creating our graphic and Derica for helping with the script.
Briefly, the goal of our SAR project is to create a plan that goes over what a native plant nursery on campus would look like, required resources, funding and costs, and maintenance. Ideally, we would also outline a plant care manual and create educational signage for the native plants. The three main prongs of our methodology are a native plant growth trial to determine which plants are best suited for UCLA's climate conditions, external outreach to learn about nursery initiatives around LA and at other universities, and internal outreach to understand the administrative procedures for establishing a nursery on campus.
EDI stands for Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. Last year, the SAR EDI team defined EDI and sustainability as fostering an inclusive, safe, and welcoming sustainability community for people of all backgrounds, including and elevating the voices and needs of historically underrepresented groups, and recognizing the existence of structural racism and discrimination, and actively challenging these norms and preconceptions that pervade environmental science and sustainability fields. So I was actually on the EDI team for SAR last year. We were looking into the current status of EDI and sustainability at UCLA with a student survey and focus groups. So, for example, we found that many participants in both the survey and community conversations noted that UCLA sustainability is dominated by white women, westernized ideals of sustainability, and lacks the perspective, leadership, and education from BIPOC and otherwise marginalized folks. A lot of students were also unaware of environmental justice and such initiatives at UCLA, so we came to 3 final recommendations: central and democratize EDI and sustainability efforts, collaborate to increase access, and provide resources and training, all of which I hope that this Native Plant Nursery team addresses through our collaborations and incorporation of Indigenous practices.
So, I'm the current editor-in-chief for a nonprofit organization called 4ELK that's based in Point Reyes, California. And 4ELK is seeking to protect the endemic and iconic Tule elk that live in the Point Reyes National Seashore, and that is land that's under the management of the U.S. National Park Service. The Tule elk and other species are in jeopardy due to the expansive ranching industry that dominates the area and has devastated this endangered coastal prairie habitat. So in rebuilding the 4ELK website, the team and I authored a new mission statement for our organization in which we state how reliance on traditional ecological knowledge is necessary to address the climate and biodiversity crises and to rewild Point Reyes. Additionally, I wrote a land acknowledgement to recognize the Coast Miwok as the original and present-day stewards of the Point Reyes area. At 4ELK, we recognize the narrative of cattle ranching by European descendants being the, quote, historical land use of Point Reyes is a mere myth which perpetuates the intentional erasure of thousands of years of Coast Miwok history and their sacred connection to this region. Efforts by the Coast Miwok Tribal Council to protect the Tule elk and their habitat from invasive ranching have been critical in this movement for environmental justice. So going forward, we hope to consult the council and form a partnership with them as we continue to push for restoration of these culturally and ecologically significant lands.
Right, so with the focus on EDI for our project, there is another project within the UC community that has already incorporated indigenous plants and cultivation practices, which is the Indigenous Community Learning Garden at UC Berkeley. So this garden mixes California and indigenous native plants and uses indigenous cultivation practices to display the synergistic environmental interactions among plants. Now, this garden is being used for class courses that educate the school community about native plants and traditional practices, as well as research opportunities just pointing to the multi-purpose nature of a native plant garden. We think that Berkeley's garden is going to be a useful resource as a starting point for incorporating EDI into our own nursery. This is because we can more easily relate with our project, as we both want to increase awareness about indigenous planting culture and are both projects in a school setting with student involvement. Conducting an interview with their project leaders to ask how they decided to reach upon certain indigenous plants and practices for their garden, most effective strategies to educate the community about these practices, and any challenges that they faced would be of significant importance for our nursery.
Yeah, exactly. And one thing we definitely want to do is reach out to indigenous horticulture leaders. For example, David Hummingbird. either to request an interview regarding the outlook on native plant nurseries or to consult with them on the process. And we also want to contact nurseries that specialize in hosting teach-ins and organizing book readings on indigenous agricultural practices, which the Theodore Payne Foundation Nursery actually does. They have a training course for professionals on native plant landscaping. And I think another valuable resource or thing we could do would be producing educational signage if we find it time that integrates messages that indigenous communities care about, like discouraging people from harvesting white sage in the wild by themselves because that's not sustainable. We can also incorporate indigenous names for plants in addition to scientific and common names and acknowledge culturally significant native plant species within the nursery. I think that this is an important part of detailing the sociological importance of native plants in indigenous culture.
So, looking at past native plant projects, particularly ones through SAR, we can also get an idea of ways to incorporate EDI into ours. Since 2010, there have been 5 native plant SAR projects, but none of them have taken a focus on EDI, which I thought was interesting because 1, we're working with native plants and should be learning about indigenous practices, and 2, unequal distribution of green space is a huge part of EDI environmentalism that drought-tolerant and low-maintenance native plants could be a solution for. So, for example, the 2016 Biodiversity at Sage Hill team provided educational signage and an ecosystem-focused lesson plan for a daycare facility. And these education-type deliverables would have been a great place to incorporate Indigenous and equity awareness teachings. And we're hoping to do this with, for example, Mia's experience writing Indigenous acknowledgements. The 2017 Sage Hill Biodiversity Restoration team kind of touched on this by providing signage that included cultural history of the native Tongva tribe, which utilized the site. I think this was a great first step, but we would want to take this a step further by including their relationships with each native plant in addition to the site.
EDI is highly important to our team's project because Indigenous cultures are heavily tied with the use and protection of native plants. For example, white sage, a plant native to Southern California, is used for its antifungal and antibacterial properties, has edible seeds, and can also be made into a tea. Native plants are vital in terms of providing Indigenous peoples with sources of physical and spiritual nourishment and in promoting food sovereignty. In addition, ethnobotany is an important field because, historically, colonization of the Americas, or California specifically in our case, has led to the introduction of non-native invasive plant species which have outcompeted native plants. And with the loss of native plants, native plant culture is lost as well, and the dynamics within these ecosystems are hurt by these changes. Since sustainability is a relatively nascent field of research, it's important to set the precedent for EDI for future generations of scientists, researchers, and activists. We want to be as inclusive and equitable as possible by uplifting all of the voices involved in and impacted by this issue, because sustainability isn't just about one country or region. It's about the future of our planet and humanity as a whole.
Thanks, Mia, and yeah, that about wraps it up, so thanks everyone for listening.